Please bear with us just while we get that that set up. We will also there'll also be a survey at the conclusion of the webinar as well. So please be sure to complete that survey. There is a bit of an incentive there for everybody that completes that survey as well. For any of you that have joined our webinars that we've run earlier this month on Nucleus Cloud and 4G and 5G technologies, you'll know that we've been taking questions and quite a lot of good and excellent questions at the end of those sessions. We've been taking those questions at the end. Today being a technical session, we will be operating this in a slightly different way. We will be running relevant questions to the topic that's being discussed throughout the session as well. So David and I will be reviewing those questions, and we'll be asking Aaron those questions throughout the session as well. So I'm sure lots of us are pretty familiar now with how Zoom works. So down the bottom of your screen, if you're viewing in full screen, you can see a Q&A box there. Please type your question in there, and we will do our very best to answer that live or at the end of the webinar today. So please keep those questions coming throughout the session. So without any further ado, we will get started. Aaron, if you could kick on to the next slide. Just before we do actually get started, for those of you that are IT resellers and you're new to D-Link, you haven't sold D-Link before, welcome. It's great to have you with us. We would certainly encourage you to sign up as a partner to join our partner program. There's no cost to joining our partner program, and there's some great rewards that you receive for that. With upfront discounts available, there's rewards that you can claim from us in things like gift cards and so on, provided that you spend a minimum amount of money in a calendar quarter with us. You get access to priority technical support, which is based in our Sydney head office in Australia, which is a really, really great resource that lots of our partners like. There's a demonstration or NFR purchase program, and from time to time, there's bonus offers that we run as well. There is a promotion we're running at the moment where if you reach a target, then you will receive a Amazon Alexa Go from us. So there's some great promos that we've got running at the moment. So if you are not yet a D-Link partner, I'd certainly encourage you to go and sign up as one at these two websites over on the left over here, dlink.com.au/rewards or dlink.co.nz/rewards as well. Of course, we can't sell to you directly, and that's only through our distribution partners. Aaron, if you could just advance the slide, just one. Terrific, thank you very much. Our distributors across Australia and New Zealand that we work with, being Ingram Micro and Synex. And then in Australia, you can purchase our product via Blue Chip Infotech, EdSys, Hills, Multimedia Technology, and Pacific Datacom. So if you're not yet a partner, please be sure to sign up. Okay, it's time to get the technical training kicked off. I'll hand over to my esteemed colleague, Aaron. Aaron, the floor is yours.
And a good morning to everybody. Now today I'm going to bring you part one of three parts of our cut down switching online type of agenda. So today I'll bring you through an introduction to switching. We'll go through some different types of LAN connectivity. We'll go through a bit of fibre optic, types of switch ports, because there's a few different types now. PoE, we'll explain a bit of PoE. Most people have already tried PoE. We will go through when to use layer 3 switches and some switch management options available. We will also we'll go through a bit of switch stacking and why we use it, and link aggregation. Now it's being used daily, so we'll go through a bit of that, and I will give you a live demo of how you set up LACP link aggregation. It's not hard, so just a couple of things to watch out for. So, introduction to switching. Now, switches obviously are the core of our network. Now, whether you've got a home office, your office at work, enterprise networks, data centers. We have many switches for certain applications. Now, you would pick a series depending on your functionality and the requirements. If you need any hand with this type of scenario, you'll let us know. That's what we're here for. But we've got everything from redundant options, PoE, different port speeds, connectivity, monitoring. So depending on your requirements, depends on what series we put in. So you put a switch that's fit for purpose, not because it's cheap. So connecting switches, and connecting devices to switches. So 2 mediums, basically fiber and copper. Now, fiber, for example, can go up to 80 Ks in this example. I've seen it longer than that, and it all depends on the fiber module itself. Copper, we can go 100 meters. Now, it says 100 meters. I say 90 meters plus 10 meters for patching. It's important to keep it under the 100 meter mark. If you start going over 100 meters, you will start experiencing CRC errors, and they're monitorable in actually physically listed in these switches. The good thing is we can put devices 100 meters away. If you want to go past 100 meters, there are certain types of switches we have that can do up to 300 meters, and that's a PoE extended, but the speeds will degrade over distance. So when we are using copper, we will be very familiar with these RJ45 connectors. They are on the end of every patch lead. Everyone understands an RJ45 connector. Inside that cable will be typically either UTP or STP cable. So that's unshielded twisted pair and shielded twisted pair. Now the main thing here is you've got 4 pairs of wires. The twist is different for every pair to avoid crosstalk, and the shielded twisted pair also aids with crosstalk and separation as well, which leads you into the different categories of cables. So there's been everything from Cat3, everyone knows about Cat5. Hopefully we don't see any more Cat3. I mean, I still see it on sites occasionally. It's a horrendous thing. But Cat3, for example, is only a 10 meg connection. So if someone's redoing an old building and there's already existing Cat3 in there, some people tend to reuse it, and then they find that their links are dropping out or they're downgrading to 10 meg. Cat5, 100 meg. Cat5e is where we start going to gigabit. And then we start playing with 10 gig. Now 10 gig, Cat6a for 100 meters. Cat6 and Cat6 SD are less than 100 meters in distance. So the main thing is if you're going to do 100 meters with 100 meters with 10 gig, definitely Cat6a. And use the proper stuff for the proper shielding and the proper terminations. It's horrible to terminate, but it's well worth it in the end. So when we are going past this 100 meter limitation, we will typically use fiber. Now, what we see in front of us here is a media converter. So we're taking the fiber in and we're converting it to an Ethernet. Now, this particular one here is a gigabit media converter device. Just a word of warning, if we are using a media converter, match the port speed on the switch with the speed of the fiber. If you don't, the fiber won't come up. We also have SFP. Now, we can have SFP and SFP plus ports on a switch. Small form factor pluggable is what it stands for, and there's LC connectors on here. That's a transceiver, it goes into the port. And fiber is very straightforward. If you plug it in, it comes up. If it doesn't come up, swap the pair over. That's predominantly the problem. Now, there is 2 types of fiber. We've got multi-mode and single mode fiber. Multi-mode typically is up to 500 and odd meters on OM3. OM3 is very common. People should be very well versed with OM3, but there is OM1 out in the field. So you just got to be careful with speeds on those. We can get longer distances than that on OM1 with special SFP modules. And OM4 up to 1 kilometre. Single mode, obviously well beyond. So single mode, 80 Ks on ZX standard. Now, also depending on, I've noticed on different parts of the country, different states, predominantly use different types of fibre as a core. So now, choosing switches. When we're choosing switches, we need to take in consideration network speeds. Some people may only want 100 meg. If it's a CCTV network, cameras typically 100 meg. Some people think you shouldn't be putting gigabit in there. I prefer gigabit everywhere. We go gigabit 10 gig. We might want 40 gig or 100 gig even. So we've got the number of ports, port count on a switch. Everything from 5, 48. Types of ports. We might want RJ45. We may want a complete fibre switch full of SFP modules. PoE, we might not want PoE. In saying that, over 80% of our switch sales are PoE. So predominantly, all switches are coming with PoE these days. There's PoE, PoE Plus, PoE Plus, which we'll go through later. And manageability of the switch. Now, there is unmanaged dumb switches. There are smart managed switches, which are pretty much just web interface, limited command line. Then there's fully managed switches where we have web command line and SNMP monitoring. Zoom. Aha. That might be better. Sorry, it's had a request to remove the video. And expandability. So we might want 10 gig uplinks. We might want 100 gig uplinks. And we might want them stackable. That'll increase backplane throughput, which we'll go through later as well. So the speeds of networks. Now, we've got everything from 10 meg up to 100 gigabit. So 10 meg these days, very rarely used. I still come across it, which is sad. Door intercoms was the last thing I saw that were 10 meg. Fast Ethernet, 100 meg. Legacy networks and CCTV networks, typically people still use 100 meg switches for those. Gigabit, common, it's everywhere. Now, but with Wi-Fi 6, we have the ability to exceed the 1 gig limit for Wi-Fi. If doing so, we need to give it more speed. So there are 2.5 gig and 5 gig switches available, depending on the cabling. We also have 10 gig. Also Wi-Fi 6, I've seen some access points that do have a 10 gig connection. And 10 gig, mainly for network backbone, but it's normally switch to switch, switch to server. I have seen 10 gig to the desktop, which is becoming popular. We go 40 gig and 100 gig. Now they're typically switch to switch communications. So D-Link has many part numbers and a lot of people don't really understand them. To start with, we have DGS at the start of our part number. That means D-Link Gigabit Switch. We also have DES, which is D-Link Ethernet, being 100 meg switches. We have a series number, 1100, 1210, 3130 in this case. Then we go port numbers. That's how many switch ports there are. 16, 28, and 54. Then we have a P on the end, being Power over Ethernet enabled. And the last one, we have an S for SFP ports. That would typically be a switch that contains predominantly SFP connections, fiber switch. So, just to recap, RJ45 ports, copper ports on switches, normal, everyone understands them. Here we have an SFP or SFP Plus for fiber optic transceivers. Now they look the same, so just be aware that some of them are 10 gig, some of them are gigabit. With PoE, we have the ability to send power and data down one cable to make a device work. For those who aren't familiar with PoE, we use industry standard PoE, 48 to 56 volts DC, not the 24 volts DC proprietary stuff. We're able to put a camera, in this case, 100 meters away from the switch and power it and receive data from it. It can be beneficial in such a way we don't have to install power at the other end. That can be very expensive to run for 100 meters. We also have extended PoE, which can go up to 300 metres. But again, you're going to lose speed the further you go out. Now, PoE standards. So we can supply PoE to the other devices. There are a few power requirements at the other end for devices. So PoE, so the 802.3 AF standard is 15 watts per port. That's a pretty industry standard sort of figure. We then have PoE Plus going up to 30 watts per port. So if you had, say, an outdoor access point, they will have a built-in heater to stop condensation and also to keep them warm in frozen environments. They will require up to 30 watts. PoE++. Now, PoE++ gives you up to 60 watts per port. 60 watts will typically be used for, we'll just say, LED office lighting that we can run physically off a PoE port. Just bear with me, I've got a question.
You okay to answer that one, Aaron? So
I just saw that come up
for you. Question here from Adrian.
Oh, yeah.
In what instance would you run 300 metres of PoE with the CAT cable run limit being 100 metres?
Well, there's different views on this. My view would be sparingly, but you can. It would be, say you had a warehouse environment and you were going to install cameras that were beyond 100 metres. Like a lot of warehouses are, say, 200, 250 metres long. So you could put a switch and cabinet up one end and run out all the feeds to your cameras. Or if you're doing car park cameras and the run is too long, to put the camera up the pole further out in the car parks. That's a typical installation. I don't personally see much of it. I do hear of people doing it. But yes, you will drop off speeds. If you had a gigabit port at one end and 300 metres away, you could drop it down to 10 meg. It really depends on the cable run, how much you lose, speeds, devices, all sorts of things.
So Aaron, there is just a range of D-Link switch that we've just launched really just in the last 2 weeks.
Correct, yeah.
Which will do up to 250 metres of PoE. But with a degradation in speed, when you're at 250 metres, you are down at 10 meg. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes. We're very conservative. We stop ours at 250. There are others that go to 305, I think it is. But it would be a horrendous connection at 305.
Okay, hopefully, Adrian, that answers your question. Another question here from Raymond. If your device only needs 15 watts of power,
yes,
the switch is PoE Plus at 30 watts. Will it burn the device?
No. It negotiates the power level and the class of power it requires. You could even set that port, hard set the port in the switch for PoE++. Give it 60 watts. The device is only going to take what it requires. And yes, you can connect PoE ports on one switch to PoE ports on another switch, and they'll negotiate and turn the power off. So that's another common question I get.
Okay, so it'll just use so the device will take whatever power it needs from the switch,
That's
as
correct.
opposed to the switch overpowering it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
That would be fun to watch, actually. Yes.
Great questions, Raymond and Adrian. Please, if you've got questions, just pop them into the Q&A box.
So yes, PoE++, there's 60 watts here. This LED lighting, I'm seeing a bit of this at the moment, where we can plug lights for your office into the PoE switch. And then you can cascade the light to another light, to another light. In those lights, they typically have a temperature and humidity sensor and a motion sensor. So we can bring all the data back with it and feed that into building automation. And the high power PoE, that's more designed to power monitors and those small sort of next unit computing type of PCs from PoE. Right, so when we do use PoE and a switch, we have a power budget to obey. So all of our switches on the net have spec sheets. In the spec sheets are our physical power budgets for each model. When you do use PoE and a switch, we have to sort of budget for how many ports of PoE, how much PoE, and the cable loss to get the PoE to the device. Now, in this case, this 15% on the slide here is power loss over distance. That's very conservative. No, sorry, that's a very good value to use. You won't go wrong with that one. But in this case, we have 15 cameras consuming 10.5 watts plus the 15%. It brings you just under the 185 limit for this particular switch. Now, with our switches, if you exceed the 185, it's one of two things will happen depending on the model number. You will either get an extra 10% or you will get just under, I think you lose about 5%. So it'll deny the next port. So if you're plugging in, say, the 16th camera and it's not working, it'll be because you've exceeded your PoE budget. Now, if it's a PoE enabled switch, we physically have a table that will show us how much PoE we're consuming and what ports and how much and what class.
So Aaron, just a quick question here from Mr. Anonymous, or Mrs. Anonymous, or Ms. Anonymous.
The Anonymous.
If you don't use all of your PoE budget in port A or port 1, will the remaining watts be usable from other ports? Or does the PoE switch reserve the entire amount for port 1?
No, you have a general amount, say in this case 185 watts, to use however you want over all the ports in this particular switch, up to the class that we can supply. So if we can supply 60 watts for that port, you will get 60 watts in that port. Is that sort of along the lines of?
I think so. So yeah, the budget there is to be shared. It's not reserved, specifically reserved for particular ports.
No.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question. Great question. Thanks very much.
That's good. Now with our PoE switches, we know that they're PoE enabled because we have a P on the end. Now, we have a P, so DGS, series number with P on the end. That's PoE and PoE plus. Some models can have an additional PoE power supply, redundant power supply connected, but we'll go through that in a moment. MP is an extended PoE budget. And then we have MPP, which is PoE plus, that does 60 watts per port. So if you are playing with the office lighting, you've got to go to the MPP models. Now, this particular switch example here has 270 watts bog standard in the switch and available for all your ports to use. Say we want to exceed that, we can then use a DPS 700 redundant power supply. So that'll bring that PoE budget up to 740 watts. Now, there is one side note I've got to let people know. If you're supplying PoE to your network, you're doing it for an intended purpose that's normally important. So they're either phones, lighting, Wi-Fi, cameras, and they're important devices you want to keep running. So we have the PoE switch on a UPS. When we add in this redundant power supply, we're making that one particular switch now use in excess of 740 watts. So when you're speccing up your UPSs, make sure you're going your half power and adding in the extra you're putting in. That becomes a rather decent UPS to use there.
Aaron, I think you're just being a little bit tricky here, Aaron, and I've caught you out. You're trying to trick everybody up. I think the power budget of that 3630/28 PC is actually 370 watts.
That's why I said this example here. I saw the typo as I was reading it.
No, it was a deliberate. You were just testing us all, weren't you, Aaron?
Of course, yes, that's right.
Well done.
People are paying attention. It's very surprising when I talk.
Yep.
Yes, I thought that was a bit low for a layer 3 3600 series, but yes, anyway.
I've got a question here from Steve for you, Aaron, just before we go on.
Oh, yes.
Does legacy Cat3 and Cat5 cable handle PoE and data okay, or will there be data degradation?
You will have issues powering devices over legacy cabling. I've seen that before. And you will have, you'll have all sorts of issues. You will have all sorts of issues. Now, I've been with D-Link for, just a side note, for 14 years now. I've seen a lot of factories when they were first built and cabled and we put equipment into. 10 years later, I've seen a lot of the connections fail and data cabling fail over time. So especially patch leads, the punch down in the endpoints and the punch down in the back of the racks over time, and it's always the data pair that lives. So yeah, they do degrade, most definitely degrade, and they're going to cause you issues. I think just a heads up on that one.
So in that situation, you'd recommend a recabling?
Not so much recabling, but recertification.
Okay.
Like the unfortunate, very expensive fluke testifiers you can get, they will pinpoint your fault straight away. Unfortunately, the Sparkies do charge for testing per port, but it's well worth it. And if you're ever doing any Cat 6A with 10 gig, if you want 10 gig over 100 meters, you make sure your cable gets certified using a proper fluke meter and get the results, because you'll see the frequency dwindle off over the distance.
Okay.
If you don't get that right, you're going to will hurt.
Stuart's got a question here, which we might come to at the end. Stuart, I'll ask it if Aaron might know this off the top of his head. Noise is an issue for many of our customers, as in physical noise. Do you have any fanless models or options to reduce noise?
We do, but they are port limited. Typically 10 ports or less, we have a fanless PoE version. Because if you go any more than 10 ports with PoE, the power supplies get too hot and you'll need fans.
Yeah, it is something we do get asked from time to time.
I was on the phone yesterday or the day before with that exact thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Very, very common question. Very good question. Yeah. Because unfortunately, yes. You need fans to cool the power supplies to supply the power. So. Now, with our PoE budgets, this is an example of some of our switches in our ranges. Unmanaged 8-port switch at the top there, that'll be fanless. That'll be 52 watts fanless. The 121010P is a fanless PoE switch. That has an external plug pack, hence got it to cool the power supply. And then every other switch here is definitely got fans in it. So everything from the P having 193 watts, MP being 370. So that's 24 ports at 370 watts. So that's the MP for definitely more power. And then we've got the 3130 series, start at 370, can go to 740 with the redundant power supply. And we also offer a PoE injector. Our PoE injectors are a little bit more than most, but they are a smart PoE injector. There's intelligence in that PoE injector. If you were to accidentally take the cable that has the power and the Ethernet and plug that into a switch, maybe accidentally, it'll turn the PoE off so you don't burn the port out on the switch. I personally tested this in my house, accidentally, and it still works, which is very good.
How's it down?
There are, this is basically an active PoE injector. Then there's other brands out there that have passive. Those ones just force PoE onto the cable. So you're taking the 54 volts and shoving it in your switch and let the smoke out. And I have seen that happen too. So before I jump into layer 3, any questions on PoE?
Now, I've got a question here. Does the 1510 series PoE switches have a comparable power budget to the 1210? Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Marcus. Yes, they do. We do have on the 48 port version of the 1510 switch, you can put the DPS 700 redundant power supply in there to bump up that power budget up to 740 watts. Other than that, they're identical. There is not in the 1510 series. There's not an 8 or a 10 port version of that PoE switch. The smallest amount of ports is the 1510 28P with 24 PoE ports.
Right. Now, layer 3 switches. So, out of the box, all switches are layer 2 devices. When you add an IP interface to a switch, it becomes a layer 3 device. But layer 2 devices, they use MAC address switching. Also, some layer 2 devices, we call them layer 2 plus, have what they call software-driven IP routing. They are basically a layer 3 switch. But the layer 3 functionality is done in software, not in hardware. That's the main thing. A pure layer 3 switch, like down here, is MAC switching and hardware-driven IP routing. It means it's on chip. Proper layer 3 switch, so you can route between subnets on chip a lot faster than your software-driven IP routing. That's dependent on an OS, RAM, CPU, any other things that are going on in the switch at the time. Excuse me. So, when would we use a layer 3 switch? Well, when we have a network, a flat network, we have a very, very large broadcast domain. If you have a very large broadcast domain, it's a very noisy network and it will slow down. And it will also, if you were to throw IP phones, cameras, multicast devices onto a single network, it's going to become a very, very noisy network. And for example, phones will suffer if you plug cameras into a network. So what we do is we VLAN them. When we VLAN them, we will create different subnets. When we do different subnets and assign an IP interface to the VLAN, that will become the gateway of all the devices in that particular subnet. We can then route between them. We're bringing the broadcast domain down. So as soon as we start VLANing, VLANs start off at a layer 2. Layer 2 VLANs are separation. So we're separating the traffic. Then when we make them layer 3, we give them an IP address for each VLAN. That becomes the gateway of the devices. And then we can route the traffic between. We make smaller networks, smaller broadcast domains, faster networks. And then on top of that, we can do policies, rules, quality of service for phones. So it's actually a very important thing to do layer 3. Now layer 3, ideally, would be nice to be done in a layer 3 switch because it's on chip. A lot of people in the industry will do inter-VLAN routing using your firewall. That's okay, as long as your firewall has LAN to WAN speed, LAN to LAN speed and processing power between subnets. I saw a question come in there.
And we've got a question here from Malcolm.
Yeah.
From just outside of Wellington, New Zealand. A good afternoon to you, Malcolm. Can you VLAN the layer 2 plus switches which are being discussed?
Yes, yes you can. We can VLAN all of our switches from the 1100 series and above. If we want to turn them to a layer 3 type of route, if we want all these 3 subnets on 3 different IP ranges to communicate, then we will need some sort of layer 3. So that'll be a layer 2 plus for the routing or proper layer 3 switch that's done on chip.
And a question here from Nathan. The routing and the switch, does it need a gateway IP like a router?
Now, when we do VLANs, say if this was VLAN 1, this is well, actually this is covered in the next switching training with David, but just a glimpse. So if we make this VLAN 1, VLAN 2 and VLAN 3, 3 separate subnets, we would give this an IP address. The IP address of the VLAN, the IP interface, becomes the gateway of these devices. So they communicate with that IP address, and then from that IP address, we can route to this IP address, which is the gateway of these devices. If that doesn't confuse you too much.
Okay, so it's not a router like you would have a router interfacing between the internal network and an external network like?
Oh yeah, no, by all means, no, we can do routes from the IP interfaces
Okay.
to wherever we need to go. By all means, yes. But by default, we would route 000 out to the router or the internet.
Nathan,
But
hopefully
we can separate that out. We can route it anywhere.
You can tune in on the 11th of June for the next session with David Urbano, which will go into that in a little bit more detail.
You will love it. So, our switch families and our sort of layer 2, layer 3 options. So, and I mentioned the 1100 series. Was that a question that came in?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Layer 2, DG 1100 series only. So, layer 2. Layer 2 plus. So, basically, it's layer 2 plus we have the ability for IP routing in software for the 1210, 1510. Layer 3. So, now it says light layer 3. 3130s have on-chip layer 3. Layer 3 plus. Now we've got our 3630, so they're a full layer 3 switch. And our 5000 series are just psycho machines. They're beautiful. Dynamic IP routing is only on 3130s because it's proper layer 3. And hardware accelerated and also advanced routing protocols on the 3630s. The 3630s too, we have enhanced licensing as well for extra functionality. So when we're playing with our switches, manageability is what we want to play with. We have two categories. We have smart managed and we have fully managed switches. So our smart managed are basically web GUI interface. Now these do have command line, whether it's a limited command line, but there is command line in there these days. Because that's the 1510. Otherwise, we have fully managed. Now, our fully managed switches have web GUI, command line. So everything you can do on the command line, you can do on the web GUI on both of these switches, mind you. There's a couple of core special functionalities that are different. We have web GUI, command line, and we have SNMP. Now, we have simple network management protocol. We have a piece of software called DView 7, which is free and available for anyone to use, up to 25 devices. We're releasing DView 8 shortly, which looks a lot better actually. I saw a question come in.
It's a question from Rob. Are we going to cover nucleus switches in these sessions? There's nothing specifically on nucleus switches, although the same rules and principles apply to the nucleus switches as well. So it's the way about going and configuring VLANs and routing and so on is done in the same way on a nucleus DBS 2000 switch as you would find in a DGS 1210 series switch.
Correct. And basically, instead of having this type of web GUI, you do it via the Nucleus portal.
Thanks, Rob. Good question.
Another one.
Another question here from Malcolm. Is the DGS 1100 series supported in the DView software, the D-Link's software management tool?
I'll have to check. But it's got to be, well, look, it's got to be SNMP managed. There could be a myth to that.
David, Malcolm, David Urbano is just checking on that now. We'll come back to you at the end on that one.
Yeah, compatibility list. And there was another one that came in. Oh, no.
Daniel's just comment on here. Yes, they do work. So Daniel, thank you very much for doing the job of Aaron and David.
That's right.
I'll send you an employment form that you can complete. Just make sure you include your bank details with that as well.
That's it. So yes, and I have tried DView 8, which is coming out soon, and I'm very happy. So stacking. Now we have the ability with our 1510 series and above to physically stack the switches. The 1510 series and above have SFP plus ports that we can use for hardware stacking. When we enable hardware stacking, we take those ports out of the inbound ports and we use them out of band. And that enables us to make one big entity with numerous switches. In doing this, we do this, And before someone says, yes, I am creating a loop, but because I've told it I'm going to use hardware stacking, it's out of band. And it's not restricted by TCP overheads because it's a proprietary protocol. So we will get 40 gig inter-switch bandwidth between all these switches. This will become one entity, one IP address, and everything's manageable through the one web interface, or command line if you like. When they are linked like this, you can't log into anything that's not the master. If the master disappears, something else negotiates and becomes a master. Because we have the ability, we can also use the other set of 10 gig ports and create 80 gig bidirectional, because we can. It'll give you higher interspeed switching, centralized management of the whole stack. So one IP address, one web interface, and redundancy. Because if the switch in the middle disappears, it's going to route the traffic the other way. And it's a very intelligent algorithm. Even when it's stacked like this, if you've got a port communicating with another port on the same stack, it's going to use an algorithm to find the fastest way to get it there. So it's yes, that's very good. And this can be done over fiber. So if you're using warehouse and warehouse and warehouse, you can use single mode fiber and just put them all on the one big switch. It also gives you the ability, so if you're using LACP, you can pull one link out of the top switch, one link out of the bottom switch, and make one trunk and send it somewhere. And if that switch disappears, you've still got this one communicating. So it's is that a question?
I've got a question here from Wayne. When you select stacking, does it immediately take all the 10 gig ports or just those used for stacking?
Now, when you enable stacking, by default, it's going to take the last two. So these two ports here, if we then enable 80 gig stacking, it will take all four. So it's always the last two to start with. And so what you could do, you could use the last two here for stacking, and you could send these ones off to a server or another switch.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Wayne, for the question. Question from Don. Can DV be installed on a workstation, or does it need a server operating system?
No, just a workstation. Just be aware, when you install this free DView, there technically is a license, but it's included with it, it's free. It locks it to the MAC address of the LAN card. So don't install it on a virtual server, which has the MAC address changing all the time on the LAN card. That causes a wee bit of an issue with the license. You can just reinstall it, back up the config and reinstall it. Yes, just DVU8. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Aaron, a question here from Scott. Is switch stacking a D-Link specific technology?
Yes. Well, it's a proprietary talkie-talkie between switches for us, yes. You can't interconnect our switch with another brand and stack it that way, no. And there it is. We can only stack within the same series of switch. So if we had a 1510 series switch, we can go 1510, 1510, 1510. We can't put a 3130 in the mix. So okay. 1510s by themselves or 3130s by themselves, we can't mix them. It's mainly due to the chipsets.
Okay. Wayne has just asked a question here, or maybe a comment. I'll take it as a comment. If you install DV on a virtual server, can you then set the MAC to be static?
Oh yeah, look, as long as you keep the MAC address the same on the LAN card, that's fine.
Okay.
It just helps when you have to reinstall it. So, link aggregation. So, LACP. It allows multiple connections to be grouped together to form a bigger pipe. When we do this using LACP, they will be treated as a single port in STP and create you a redundant data link between 2 points. I saw a question come in. So there are two types of LACP, static and physically 802.3AD. Now, I personally use this with my QNAP. I have a DGS 1510. I give it two 10 gig connections to my QNAP, and I do it as an LACP trunk. Main difference with static. Static's used between older type of legacy devices and other brands. With the static link aggregation, you've got to set one of the links as a master. If that goes down, then the whole link goes down. Whereas LACP, one of them will auto-negotiate to be a master. But if that goes down, it can go right down to the last cable without you having an issue. To set it up, it's actually rather simple. Now, we can have, like on the previous slide, more than one link aggregation group on the same switch. So it's important we get the numbering correct. The number has to be the same on both ends of the link. But to turn it on, we just enable it. We then set it to LACP. If I was to click on that, it would come down and say static or LACP. And the same group number. Tick the ports we're going to use and hit apply. Now there was questions come in there.
No, they're okay. It's just someone just wanting to check the
Cool.
the link as to where to go download DView from.
So I'm going to give you a live demonstration of link aggregation. So LACP all the way. I'm going to log into both of my switches. I have a separate VLAN where I am here, separate subnet into VLAN routing. I have two switches. I've got a 20 port and a 10 port, 1210 series switch, of which I've set up an IP address. I'm going to turn on link aggregation. I'm going to select the ports and I'm going to connect them together with the two cables. So I'm going to create my loop and it'll all be good. So I'm basically going to do this. Now, the main difference between this particular slide and mine, I have two different types of switches I'm using. So I'll be using 7 and 8 off one switch and 19 and 20 off the other, I think. So
Aaron, just a quick question here from Chris.
Yep.
It comes down to why you'd want to do link aggregation. Does that, or LACP, does that double the bandwidth?
Yes, it does. Yes. You can do link aggregation with gigabit ports. You can do it with 10 gig ports. So if you had two spare 10 gigs, you can combine them together to make a 20 gig trunk to a server or 20 gig link to another switch. So that's the main reason we use link aggregation. And especially like with my QNAP. I mean, it's sort of irrelevant because my hard drives can't supply enough data for that, but it's because I can. So I can supply a 20 gig link from my storage to my home network. So what I'll do, you're on mute.
Sorry, Aaron, another question here. What's the main advantage of LACP versus static?
It's redundancy. Basically, with static, we must assign, say you had 4 links, one of them will be a master. If that master ever dropped out or you pulled the master out, the whole 4 links are going to drop off. Whereas LACP, it's redundant. So you'll have an auto-negotiated master. If that disappears, you've still got 3 links. If that disappears, you've got 2 links. It keeps going right down to a single link.
Another couple of questions here, Aaron, before we get started on this demo. So what causes a broadcast storm with LACP?
Ooh. So we are going to connect more than one cable between switches. When we do that, we're effectively looping the switches. When we loop a switch, we cause a broadcast storm. When we cause a broadcast storm, they're CPU intensive packets of data that hit the CPU of the switch and they bring the switch down. So basically, when you loop a network, you'll bring down the entire network. So to avoid that, we turn on LACP as a protocol, and that'll take care of that looping scenario.
Okay, another question here from Don. Could I or should I use link aggregation in conjunction with server NIC teaming?
If you have the need, yeah, definitely. If you need more than 1 gig link to your server, most definitely. If you're running a server that's hosting virtual servers, then yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks, Don. Aaron, over to you for the demo.
So we are seeing our login here to one of my 2 switches. In this switch here, the only thing I have done is physically given it an IP address on the correct VLAN. And I have, on this particular VLAN, turned on loopback protection in case I do a boo-boo and try and bring down the whole webinar. And I have tested that, and loopback protection works well. So on the 12.10.10p, this is the one at the furthest end of the link. I'm going to go into my layer 2 functions. I'm going to go down to link aggregation, port trunking. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to apply it. I am then going to turn on ports 7 and 8. This is a 12.10.10p. So ports 9 and 10 on this one are fiber ports. I've got it connected by 2 copper cables. So they're the last 2 copper cables. I will apply that. I will then jump into the one that's connected to it. I will then type in the right password. I will do exactly the same thing on this end. Ding, 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 ding. Enable. And 19 and 20 are the 2 cables I'm going to be using, with group number 1 set to LACP, otherwise it's static, so it's LACP, and I hit apply. So I'll just check my little ping packets here. Let's have a looky here. There we go. I can see both switches. They're both up. Now, at the moment, I have 1 cable connected. So if I was to roll back here, plug in my 2nd cable, wish for the best, and I should have access to both switches still, which I do. So just to show you that, I'll have a look here. So this is the first switch. Refresh the page, and there it is. I've now got a 2 gig pipe basically between the 2 switches. And I can go over there and pull out 1 cable. It's still fine. I can plug it back in. I can pull out the other one. It'll be fine. So that's as simple as LACP is. The biggest catch you just got to watch out for is the ID number. This ID number must be the same on both ends. Whoops. On the same on both ends. And technically, one end has to be set to active. In this case, the 1210 series, as long as one end is set to active, it's going to work. Both of these switches are currently set to active. So you've got active, active, it'll work. Just you can't have passive and passive. That's the one thing.
Got a question here, Aaron, from Craig.
Yep.
Since all ports are duplex and provide 2 transmission and 2 receives, if you double the bandwidth, is there a difference with the PoE port, as these also should be duplex? And maybe can you run LACP as well as PoE over a port? I'm not sure you can run LACP on PoE because you're not going to have a PoE device to aggregate.
No. And with a PoE device, you're only going to pull power off 1 cable, which then would have to negotiate. I haven't.
But Craig, if we haven't answered your question,
I haven't tried that, to be honest.
Craig, if we haven't answered your question, just type another question, in there.
Yeah, oh, I'll have to try that myself. That's interesting. And the only way we could really try that would be using something like an access point that has 2 gigabit ports and requires PoE.
Yep. I guess that you would be able to do. You would be able to do that to utilize those 2 ports on that AP to give you 2 gig of bandwidth, particularly if it was a an AX access point, for instance.
Okay.
Okay. Question here from Anthony. Can you use LACP between D-Link and other brands of switches?
Most definitely. Yes. Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that during that slide. Yes, we can, most definitely. If we're going from, say, for example, if we went from a D-Link switch to an older Cisco switch, then we would have to use static. But bar that, yes, we can do LACP between switches, yes. Just get the IDs correct on the same ends.
Okay, Craig's followed up, but Craig, what I might do is we might get in touch with you at the end of the webinar, just to make sure that we're answering your question correctly. Question here from Rob. Does VLAN tagging over the trunked ports work okay? As
yes,
they won't lose the VLAN tag.
No. And depending on the switch model, you either will be setting your VLAN tagging in this particular instance, because I'm using ports 19 and 20, I would use the tagging here. Whereas depending on the higher grade switches, it'll create a LAG group, a logically aggregated group, and separate that off. So you can put LAG group number 1 as a tag for VLAN 1, for example. But yes, you can do that.
I imagine we'll be covering that in the next tech session when we go into VLANs. Yeah.
I would maybe.
Okay. David's nodding. He says yes. So
beautiful.
Be sure to tune in. Okay, great. Thanks, Aaron. So that is LACP. You could just bring the presentation back up.
1 moment, please. Here we go. Oh no. Sorry. It reset itself. Here we go.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So got an offer for everyone that's attended today, for everybody that completes the survey, which our wonderful people in marketing have said should take around 2 minutes for you to complete. You'll then get a coupon code from us to access some of our 1210, DGS 1210, DGS 1510, and also the DXS 1210, a 10 gig variant of that switch at a at 50% off RRP. So it's a really great deal there. There'll be a particular coupon code that you can go to the D-Link web store to go and get yourself one of these switches for your own use. If you could pop to the next slide, please, Aaron. Of course, don't forget to sign up as a partner. dlink.com.au/rewards and .co.nz/rewards. And here's all our distribution partners that our product is available from as well. Great reasons to sign up to be a partner. Of course, there's the physical training that you get to attend, as well as getting access to David and Aaron and the wonderful amount of knowledge that they've got, access to our priority technical support and upfront discounts as well. So we do have another couple of questions to answer, Aaron.
Yeah.
We could, if you could just go advance to the next slide, if you don't mind.
Yep, there we go.
So it's something that might be useful for people that are on here today if you haven't worked with D-Link in the past. So please take a screenshot of that. That's got all the contact details for our entire team across Australia and New Zealand. You can see the partner priority support number over there on the left-hand side. That gets you through to our call centre out of our Sydney office. There's gets you straight through to our level 2 and level 3 support team. So please take a note of that. And wherever you are in Australia and New Zealand, there are the contact details of the account managers, the sales manager, and the pre-sales engineers to work with as well. So please take a note of those details. Perhaps just leave that screen there for a little bit, Aaron, just while we get to a couple of other questions here. I've got a question that came through at the end from Marcus. Just give me a moment. Marcus says, when would you use a 1510 series switch over a 1210 series switch?
Personally, I'd say all the time. I personally use 1510 at home. 1510 28p is what I personally prefer to use. But the main thing is the 10 gig. If you require any 10 gig ports, they start in the 1510 series switch in the DGS range.
If you've got multiples of those switches on a network as well, of course, you get the added performance benefits of being able to stack those switches together as well.
Yep, they're a higher spec switch. Yeah, and also in saying that, all of our switches from the 1100 and above have full duplex processing power. So if it's a 1 gig port, you're getting 2 gig of processing power, and that's evident on the processing power on the spec sheet too. Okay.
All right, Marcus, hopefully that answers your question. Aaron says always. Of course, sometimes customers' budgets don't go that far, but certainly having 10 gig is certainly a major benefit, and being able to stack those as well. Okay, Mark's got a question. Mark's got a question here. Which of these demonstrated features are we losing between Nucleus and the 31 and 3600 range of switch? Just while you're thinking about an answer to that, Aaron, I'll just quickly give a plug for our next sessions which are coming up. So everybody that's here today, you will get an invitation via email from us. So on the 11th of June, David, over here to my right, 2 meters away from me at the moment, he will be doing training on VLAN. So actually doing today's been a really good overview of switching technology and switching standards and protocols, but we're doing a bit more of a deep dive into VLAN, and that will be getting quite practical on that as well. The third and final session in this series will be on the 25th of June. Again, everybody here will be getting an invitation for that one as well. Aaron, what are we going to be covering in that session?
Oh, we've got STP.
Yes, Wayne. I think Wayne was on here before. Wayne's favourite thing of loops and spanning tree and so on.
Yes, we'll be doing loopback protection. STP. All that type of scenario.
Yeah.
So we go.
Yep.
I'll give you my views on that as well.
Okay. And from a sales and marketing point of view, next Thursday at the same time, we have got a webinar discussing our newest management tool, Nucleus Connect, where we'll be going through that. And there's some additional. There's a new product which is arriving to us late this week, early next week, which is certainly going to be quite useful as well. So please keep a lookout for that on Nucleus Connect. Okay, how are you going thinking about that answer for Mark about what features are you going to lose between Nucleus and the 3100 series? I guess the same answer would apply to the 1510 series as well.
Yeah, well, look, if you're going from, at the moment in the Nucleus, we're basically like a 1200 series equivalent.
Yep.
So you get most features in there, most features. But if you're going like the 3100 series, which has a bit of IP routing in it, not yet. Coming. They're going to produce more of a higher end switch, which will give us the routing capabilities.
Okay, great. hopefully that answers that question for you, Mark. Malcolm's got a question here. Did D-Link have a dual port NIC for LACP, thinking a server connection? I think we do have that.
Yeah, we do.
A 10 gig product.
Yep.
The DXE series of network card. Just looking that up in the.
While Phil looks up that, when you are connecting from a switch to a server, for example, you can use either fiber or you can use a copper. It's like in 2 SFPs with a piece of copper between it, black cable. There are 2 types of these cables to be aware of. There is active and passive. Our cables we sell are only passive. We support active, but you'll have to get them from the manufacturer of the card you're connecting to. So if you're doing a Fujitsu SAN, they use an active cable, buy their active cable, and then it works. I've also had some Intel servers that have to have an active cable.
Yep. Okay, James here's got a comment here. Is it worth mentioning D-Link warranty? Well, yes, we've got a fantastic warranty. Thanks, James, for bringing it up. Appreciate the reminder. Next business day advanced replacement across all of our range of business, products, along with a limited lifetime warranty. So the only limit being that you've got 5 years from when the product goes end of sale. Typically, a family of product that we sell will typically have 4 to 6 years of life in that. And of course, you then get access to our partner priority technical support, all firmware, all software, and so on. You continue to get upgrades for that as well. So, yeah, the warranty that we offer is pretty outstanding. Romnick asked the question: Will we be uploading this video on YouTube or similar platforms? Yes, yes, we will. You'll get that link to that. That will be in the in an email that you get from us later today or tomorrow. Mark, hopefully we've answered your question on the nuclear switching. So 3130 and 1500 series are quite similar in terms of that. So Nucleus doesn't give you any stacking. Aaron, there is some layer 2+ routing features that is in the Nucleus switch, but you are just missing out on stacking, and you're missing out on 10 gig connectivity as well. Question here: do these webinars count towards the standard D-Link training for network certification? Unfortunately, no, they don't. They don't count towards that. It's a great question that you bring up. Those full certification courses that we do offer, they are a full day course, typically run from anywhere from 7 to 8 hours, with at least 50% of the time in the classroom being taken up with hands-on practical exercises that the students, people that are attending, are completing. Unfortunately, online it's just simply too hard to be able to emulate that. We've got a couple of hundred people attending here today. We'd love to be able to send you all a switch to be able to go and complete exercises on. Some of those exercises do require multiple switches or students connecting to one another and so on. So it is something that we've looked at, but it's just a little bit beyond what we're able to spin up as quickly as we might like. But so no, it doesn't count towards the certification. When we do get back up and running with our certification program, which fingers crossed that happens in the second half of the year, if the rugby league can be up and running tonight up in Brisbane. We think that D-Link network certification is certainly it's certainly not a contact sport. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to get our cert classes back up and running again soon. Okay. Silvio asked the question: is there a cost for the full day courses? For our partners, no, there is no cost. There is no cost to that. So again, another reason to sign up as a D-Link partner if indeed you are a reseller. If you're an end customer, a final user of our product, please get in touch with your local account manager and we'll discuss that with you. But most likely we're more than happy you to come and attend that class. Neil's asked a question here. Do we have an SD-WAN product? Aaron, I think we were just talking about this yesterday on one of our team meetings.
We have the 5000 series.
We don't have a small router, if you like, that's going to do that.
No.
So a 5000 series switch at roughly $10,000 is probably overkill for
Yes.
for what Neil.
No.
It is something that we have been talking about for a little while, Neil. I
Yes,
don't have
yes.
any answer on this. Mark's got a question here. So with saying, I'm assuming that it's still related to a Nucleus switch. Could I run VLANs for voice on a Nucleus switch?
Yes, most definitely. Yep. They're pretty much identical to a normal 1210 series switch. It's just that we're configuring it over the Nucleus Connect portal, the Nucleus portal.
Okay, question here from Jamian, and we'll have to go over discussion with our marketing department. I must be out of the loop. What is Nucleus? So Nucleus, and you can if you go on Google, that, you'll find a webinar that we hosted a couple of weeks ago regarding D-Link Nucleus Cloud, which is a cloud managed network solution, which includes both wireless access points and switches with a whole host of product that's coming through. Just got a comment here from Graham Reardon, our Managing Director here in Australia. Good morning, Graham. Thanks for your contribution here. That within Nucleus Cloud, Neil, certainly be worthwhile for you to have a look at this. There will be an SD-WAN product coming into Nucleus Cloud towards the end of Q3 or into Q4. Thank you. Thanks, Graham. So Nucleus is a cloud managed network solution, ideally aimed at MSPs, managed service providers, who are looking after SME type customers, and offering a fully managed service out to their customers. So for an MSP, you're offered a multi-tenant platform that's fully manageable by you. There's a month-to-month subscription for the ongoing access to the cloud. There is a one-off cost for the hardware, whether it be a switch or an access point, or a range of any future range of product that happens to come through. So it's been very popular so far. We've got plenty of partners out there selling this product today that are out there managing and monitoring their customers' networks. So Jamian, we'll get in touch with you regarding that, or feel free to contact the account manager wherever you are across Australia and New Zealand for more details on that. Neil's got a question here. Will we be putting any SD-WAN within any of our switches into the future? I guess we'll take that on notice. As Aaron's indicated, we do have that today as a available option within our DXS 5000 series of data center switching. 48 ports of 48 ports of 10 gig fiber is probably not exactly what you're looking for, but if you are, then certainly we've got a product today which is available. D-Link is very much a standards-based organisation, so we're certainly able to go and fulfil customers' requirements based on standards and so on. So potentially yes.
Just contact me directly. We'll go through it.
Okay, that's terrific. Lachlan here's got a couple of questions regarding Nucleus Connect. Are we bringing out the DNH 100 soon? Yes, Lachlan, we're expecting a shipment of those in late this week, early next week, which is pretty exciting. And we'll be talking about that offering in our Nucleus Connect webinar next Thursday. So hopefully you can join us there. There's a question there regarding firmware for DAP 2620s. Is there any new firmware that's there? Aaron, perhaps you can follow up with Lachlan on that one.
Will do.
Okay, terrific. Nathan, the question here regarding SD-WAN, will it handle security threats with IPS and IDS? Look, probably,
Maybe
probably
hang
a little bit.
Hang 5 on that one.
Yeah, probably a little bit early to answer that one just yet. The product's just on our roadmap at the moment, but Nathan, I'll get in touch with you regarding that one. Okay, I think that's all of. No, just got another question has come in. Is there an executive C or an exec CLI mode on the DGS 1210 series?
No. If you want the type of a command line, go to 1510s.
Okay, Con responds with a sad face. Sorry about that, Con.
There's a little bit of command line, but probably not what you're after.
Preston here has asked a question. Do you have any webinars scheduled for your access points? Preston, I'm assuming you're looking for something similar to this content, so something of a technical nature. I think the answer is yes. We've got a pretty busy schedule until the end of June, but yes, we have content, and yes, look out for something coming from us in July if it's of a technical nature that you're looking for. From a salesy point of view, then yes, in July that we'll be having some information around that. Potentially, some of the things that you're looking for might be covered in next Thursday's webinar regarding Nucleus Connect, which will be focusing a lot on wireless networking products. I think there's got to be some sort of record that you've just ticked off here, Aaron. We've got 57 questions that have come through in the session today. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. It's been great to have your company. I think it's been a really great starter looking at the fundamentals of networking. Certainly, I think from understanding technology overview, absolutely understanding these fundamentals is really critical when it comes to troubleshooting, when it comes to designing networks and so on. Having a really solid understanding of these things is really important. So, Aaron, thanks very much for delivering the content in the awesome way that you usually do.
Hopefully people got something out of it.
The bar has been set very high. So VLANs that we'll be covering in session 2. We look forward to you. Joining us then, and we look forward to speaking with you and working with you and helping you to go and build and design D-Link for Business networks for your customers. It's a good afternoon or a good morning from myself, from Phil, from Aaron. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.